Hi folks, so just to set up today's episode, it is a little longer than normal and it is one of many episodes we're going to get into with our friends over at Actionism. Actionism, for those of you that were in London, we've done 2 events in London with John Alexander, the author of Citizens. What a lot of people say about that book and that whole concept of citizenship is that it's given them the language they were looking for how to run their local co-working space or run their local community building project. When the book came out in 2022, I think it was, a whole movement came around the book, particularly strong in the UK. People got together like they did in co-working communities and stuff and talked about, what can we do with this? That was called the Citizen Collective, which I was part of, and a lot of people outside my co-working community were also part of it that I know from other projects and initiatives over the years. And then that was only ever meant to be a temporary thing. That group of people collectively decided to, go off into this direction. I can't remember the name of it, but that is to focus on more thought leadership, on policy and things like that. And Actionism is people, which is, what I'm really interested in, who want to work out how to do things at a local level, I'm not a thought leadership person. I'm a how can we do something now person. One of the messages that come through with Emily and I in the whole co-working values conversation is just exploring how to apply the co-working values at a street level every day. What does this really mean? How does this little bit of information help me thrive and survive? So Gavin's here today to sort of lay the foundation of his story and how he got from where he started out after university into living in the mountains and running ski shops and then making this whole recycling outdoor clothing company called Reactive. And then that got us to Actionism. And the takeaway, so this is the kind of spoiler alert, too long didn't read. In the show notes, you will find a link to a film called Actionism, which is where this whole thing came from, which documents how to be an activist at a local level, but how to take everyday action in a very practical way in your co-working space, in your local community. And you can screen, and this is what we're absolutely encouraging people to do, you can host a screening in your co-working space and invite your members and invite people from your local community. And we've done so many things like this over the years where someone's made a movie with intention and purpose. It's been shown in a co-working space and it has sparked unbelievable conversations and helped strengthen the membership of that co-working space, but also strengthen the ties of that co-working space with the local community. So this is already the longest introduction I've ever done to a co-working values podcast. And now we're going to go into a very long, but really interesting part of a bigger picture podcast with Gavin. And then there's extensive show notes. And I would encourage you to go and check out Activism, check out the movie. On this particular one, we're going to we always put a link to the podcast in the LinkedIn co-working group, but we're going to be chasing people down to share their stories and ideas around this, not necessarily exactly what Gavin says, but the notions Gavin presents in this podcast. So without further ado, let's get into the show. Hello, folks, and it's yet another, what do we call this thing? Co-working Values podcast, twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday. Listen now, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so into today's episode, and I've got Gavin in the studio. And Gavin, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for?
That's a big question to start with. What am I known for? I guess I'm known for running a few organisations. One of them being One Tree at a Time, another one being Reaction, Collective, and then the third one being Actionism. What would I like to be known for? I've got 2 very young children at the minute, and I'm a very proud dad, and I'd like to be known for being a good dad to those 2 kids.
Oh, that's good. I would like to. My son's 14, and he's still talking to me, and cool. He's still fun, and it's such a cool thing. So folks, we're going to put loads of links in the show notes as ever, and there's going to be lots of bits popping up through this. A lot of you are familiar with the whole Citizens project that was instigated by John Alexander, and a consistent message here on Co-working Values podcast and in the London Co-working Assembly and in the European Co-working Assembly is that find the others thing. And we've got Gavin in here today to kind of merge those worlds. So Gavin, feel like, Charlie Rose now. Gavin, how did you get to this point in your citizen story?
Okay, buckle in, because this is quite a long story to have arrived at. But I grew up in the Peak District, so I grew up from the age of 9 at an outdoor activity centre called Lockerbrook. So it's up on the Snake Pass. Really isolated. I grew up there with my family, with my 2 brothers. It was a centre where we'd have different children's groups come in each week and weekend, and very isolated. In the middle of nowhere. Nearest next door neighbour was a mile away. The next village was 13 miles away, and I kind of grew up in this space that I describe as being full of possibility and almost boundaryless. And I have a very, 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 very fond memory of that youth. As I got older, as I got to the age of 18, me and both my brothers became qualified climbing instructors. So we ran the centre with my parents. So I was talking to my parents beyond the age of 14. Bernie, you'll be able to be glad to know. And then when I was about 22, my brother was working out in a ski resort in the French Alps called Courchevel. And I came to visit him on the last day of the season and came out to this space that I kind of is different, but in many ways recognised, because it is a big, wide, open expanse of the outdoors that I'd been used to growing up in. But felt even bigger because the mountains were much, much bigger. And I came out for that week and remember thinking, wow, like you can live and work here. Like, I want to do that. And so I returned the following year with my brother to run a chalet. That was some 20 years ago now, and I am still here. During that period, for the first 5 years, I ran chalets. So I did the chefing and cooking for holiday guests, and then set up a business here called the Boot Lab. So I ended up owning 2 ski shops in the resort. And what I would describe happened to me then is that I fell into what John would frame as the consumer story. So these ski resorts, especially the one that I'm in, has really been commandeered by this consumer story. We've got shops like Prada on the high street. We've got advertising over all of the ski lifts. And I kind of got absorbed into that story. This is a playground for millionaires and billionaires, really. It's a very elite space. And I ended up selling ski gear to those people. And then really I had several things happening to me over a period of about 5 years that made me really think about what I was doing. Some of those were related to the impacts of climate change that I could see on this place that I was living in. So, I don't know if you've been to the Alps at all, but you can see the incredible amount of ice we've lost through glacial melt, for example. Over time, that's almost incomprehensible. It's such huge amounts. We've got biodiversity collapse. We've had forest fires. It rains now when it should be snowing, so it's affecting our outdoor sports. And at the same time, I was working in a ski shop selling stuff to people, and just constantly faced with the huge amount of waste that organisation and business was creating. So everything would come into the shop wrapped in plastic, single-use cardboard, and we would take it off and bin it immediately. So I really started to question what I was up to and what I was doing. And then I had one major...
What made you question that?
I think it was because of where I'd grown up in my youth. I think that's a big part of my story. I grew up in that place that I said that was boundaryless. It was full of possibilities. It wasn't even really possible to get absorbed into the consumer story there, because I couldn't go to, there wasn't shops nearby to go and shop at, for example. You just, if my parents went to go and buy food once a week, it was very much like we're going out to get stuff today. That's what we'll have for the week. There wasn't an opportunity to pop down to the shop even. It was too far away. So you kind of just lived with what you had. it was a place as well where loads of people came every other week. So we met lots of different people, and a place where I felt really, really deeply immersed in nature. Uh, even, you know, even if that was being bitten by midges all the time, you were still out and about and really connected to this landscape. And I guess when I came here, I sort of felt that a little bit to give in with. But then as you get more and more absorbed into that story of consumption and consumerism, that disconnected landscape started to emerge. Another thing that happened to me in that time is we actually managed to buy a little house here and ended up with some land. So I have become much more connected to the land around me because we grow as much food and veg as we can on there. We've got chickens. I spend a lot of time out there with the children growing stuff on the land. So I've come and felt like I'm a lot more connected, which is something that's not massively possible in a ski resort, because the ski resort has displaced nature. It's forced it out. Whereas in our little community here, it's a little French village down the mountain, it's really possible to be connected again. And then
Sounds like living in a village near Disneyland.
it's funny. It's a lovely place. It's absolutely lovely. Like last week on I think it was on Wednesday, there was a message went around on the WhatsApp group, and someone's videoed a wolf walking through the village. And we've set up cameras in the gardens, and we have deer. Well, it's not really a garden; it's a field out the back. It's shared pasture land, but we put cameras out there. We have deer, we have wild boar, we have foxes, we have wolves.
I saw that on WhatsApp. That was
Yeah.
I saw. Yeah, I've just connected it.
Yeah.
You there's like a few things you said there. I have this urge to shout it out, but I used to work in a retreat center, and that kind of cycle of seeing people come in, and that really resonated with me. And then I used to work in this restaurant, and we would have a huge bit, like 200 cases of beer would arrive every other day because it was that busy. And the whole restaurant was red hot. Even in the 90s, they were red hot on recycling and just being as conscious as you could as a restaurant in the middle of the city. But it always occurred to me, like, there's so much. We recycled it, but there was like so much waste. It was like it was just crazy. And now like the contrast of the retreat thing, we live in the center of town, and we're near to so many really nice shops, and we hardly have any food in our house because we just go down every day to the supermarket or the food market. And it's the rhythm between the retreat center and where we live is like completely different. It's quite unique how where you live affects your pattern of eating is where I want to go with that.
Yeah, I guess I didn't realise that till I was a bit older, because like when I'm in this ski resort, everything you could ever want is on hand. Like if you really wanted it, like you can eat lobster at the top of a mountain. Like it's bonkers when you think of it like that. And that place I grew up was like the opposite to that. Even down to the sense that like in that environment, you don't really want to create loads of rubbish because you've then got to deal with it. Like even if you recycle it, you've then got to deal with it. You've got to take it somewhere. So in a sense, you don't want to bring. It's a bit like a mountain hut. Like a mountain hut, when you go and stay there, you have to take all your waste out. So you kind of don't want to take much in because you don't want to carry it all out again.
There's so many things you just take for granted. Like there was like Space 4, which is a co-working space. I went there when it first moved into there, and nothing was switched on. And we ran an event there, but there was it just like sitting around a table with coffees, but there was no water, and people didn't know what. They weren't that devastated, but they just kind of didn't know what to do because you went to the tap and it wouldn't work. And it was like it felt in the moment like a violation of human rights. And society's breaking down, but we just had to go downstairs to the next floor and it was okay. But there's so many things you take for granted.
Yeah, like that centre it was spring fed water. So like we had water issues all the time, especially when you're having groups coming through and using large amounts of water. So there was only a couple of showers for a group of 40. and during the summer we'd have to really ration what we were eating and what we were drinking, and the water came directly from the mountain. When we had it tested when we was probably about 13 or 14, so we ended up having to fit some systems in to make sure that the water was clean. And they came around to test the water, and it wasn't even me and one of my brothers actually let them into the farmhouse where we lived to test the water. And they rang up the next day and said, "You're going to have to close the centre, like the E. coli level of that water is through the roof." And we're like, "It's okay. That's just the water we drink in the farmhouse. Like, the rest of it is properly filtered." So yeah, but yeah, you had to like monitor the use of water. Like, you didn't have the instant gratification and chance to make that instant decision about what you eat that night or what you're going to consume. And I recognise now that that's, well, I'm sure we'll come on to, you've talked a bit about John's work and Citizens. I kind of feel like when I lived in that space and I was so interconnected to the world around me and to the others around me that I felt like a citizen. And then when I came to this ski resort, I came into the framing of a consumer, as John would call it. Everything was there at the touch of a screen. Even now, like, you could have what you want when you want, and I don't find that particularly fulfilling, if I'm honest. And I think that was part of the trigger as well for why I started to really become aware to what I was doing in that shop, in that space, and also aware to what it meant to me.
So when we moved from Ilford in London to Vigo in Galicia, like, there's we lived in Redbridge, and there's more people in Redbridge than there is in the whole of this region. And there are so many things that I just use like Ubers, Amazon next day. You just don't use here because it's not here. And a really awful, little crappy part of me was like, "Oh my God, there's no Ubers." And I like, of course you can just go down the road and get a cab or get a bus, but it seemed, again, violation of my human rights that this wasn't available. And when you step out of the system, which is basically what you've just said for the last 10 minutes, but like when you step out of the system, you realize there's how much stuff you don't need. Most of the apps on your phone you could probably do without. And, all those dry cleaning apps that tech bros make to speed up space and time.
The counter argument with people say that that's your freedom, isn't it? In this, it's your freedom to choose, to pick. I would argue that doesn't feel like a freedom to me. Like, the freedoms that I would want are healthy food, clean air, a livable planet, a community that surrounds me and that I feel connected to. Like, I'm just not really interested. It's funny because I ended up running these two shops, but I'm not interested in products really. Like, I'm not interested if a product is red next year when it was green this year. I just don't find that fulfilling. And I think
did it used to do something for you?
Say again. Did it used to? No, it never has. I think, like, living here, you do need to, in many ways, create something. Like, you do need to kind of make your own thing. Like, I loved chalet hosting because I got to go skiing all the time. I got to party with mates all the time. But there's a kind of lifespan to that. You can't do it forever. And then outside of those kind of jobs around here, there's not loads else that you can step into easily. So I think a lot of my friends that I've worked with here for years who are chalet hosted with in that first season, a lot of them are here and they run their own things. Like, some of them run bars. My one of the best mates ran the ski shop with me. Another one is like a private chef. So you kind of fall into these jobs and kind of create them so that you can live here. I don't think it's so much. I don't think I made it as a choice of like, this is what I want to do. It was kind of maybe a bit more out of necessity.
That's funny because, like, I hope I'm not stretching the imagination too far, but that is like entrepreneurialism, or it's the creator economy in a ski resort. And then it's like what Kofi said on another podcast is you become an independent economic agent out of necessity. Whereas, if you go over to the glamorous world of the Diary of a CEO, it's like this lifestyle choice,
Yeah.
and there's this like perverse void of like, I need to work out how to do this. Like in the when the whole sharing economy was at its peak, and I went to Argentina, which is where my wife is from, and I was all jacked up and excited about the sharing economy. And most of my friends there went, "That's just how we live because we have to." Like, it's, why are you inventing an app for sharing food and houses when that's just what we? Why do you need an app to do that? What's wrong with you? You know, can't you just pick up the phone? And I felt like it was a real eye opener. I was like, oh dear, that I sound like I'm trying to invent something that we don't need to solve my first world. Not that, it was just so
Yeah.
unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I obviously came here because it was like this natural landscape that just felt like I climbed a lot. I've done a lot of activities, so the space just felt really, and strangely felt like home. Because I guess I could recognize the landscape. And that's, I guess, why I fell into this role, because I wanted to remain here. I don't think it was. I think you can tell clearly from my upbringing that running a shop wasn't really the destiny that I had imagined. I did an art degree at university, so I'd always been into creative stuff. I guess there is a lot of creativity about setting up and organize a business, so I enjoyed that part of it. Yeah, for sure. Like, you have to be incredibly creative to make something work out here. But yeah, I started questioning. I think, like you said about the waste, was a big trigger. At the start of the season, we'd have all these products come in the door, and then they look better without all the plastic packaging on them. So you'd literally take it all off and put it straight into a recycling bin. Um, we don't really have the facilities to truly recycle all that stuff anyway. So it's not actually happening. And then over time, as you start to speak to the brands and the organisations within this industry, you come up against these big blockers. So you start talking to brands and say, look, like, we're trying to do some stuff within the shop space. So our shop space had always been really focused on repair, reuse, on not just selling people new stuff. We'd always had this care for like wanting to make whatever people came in with better, like fix their boots they already own, for example. And so we did start to like work with the staff team around stuff. We switched our energy to renewable energy and things like that. But then you start talking to the brands that are above you that are selling you the stuff, and you just reach these huge barriers. Yeah, we managed to get through a few of them. We managed to get them to actually remove a lot of that single-use plastic from the product. But yeah, you still really, you reach a ceiling where you can't break through. I spoke to brand employees that were very honest, and they would say that we know that skiing is going to fail because of climate change. We know that we're going to, our days numbered. What we're going to do is make as much money between that point and now as we can, and then maybe we'll pivot to something completely different.
I really appreciate when people say things like that.
Yeah.
Like, it's like pretending is so, like, when they look you in the eye and go like, oh yeah, we're really committed, and like, and if someone just goes, I've got to do it all while I can and be really honest, it's much easier to work with them, and there's probably like a bit more imagination available in there if they're like, tell you where they are. I'd rather they didn't say that and did something else, but I really like that kind of business bluntness.
I guess it's funny in the industry because you're often talking to reps that are like the middle person between the brand and selling you the products. And like, one of our reps was a really keen fly fisherman, and he was constantly working with different fly fishing organisations to sue the councils about water pollution. So like, he got what we were up to, and so he was just really frank with us. Like, he was like, well, this is not what I believe, but this is what the company is going to do. And yeah, it was good to hear that, because it sent me in a completely different direction, if I'm honest. Which comes on to, like, there was one big shift in my life that then triggered the next stage, I guess. And that was my dad actually died in a road cycling accident. And this was about 9 years ago now. He cycled into the back of a parked vehicle and ended up in a coma. So he was in a coma for about 10 days. And I've written about this a bit before, but we had to, at the end of those 10 days, we made the decision as a family to turn off his life support machine. But looking back, what I recognised happened to me now is that in those moments, in those 10 days, my sense of certainty kind of vanished. So I guess what I mean by like that is that as a white man born in the UK in the 80s, like you have a ton of privilege and you have a ton of certainty. And you're sort of taught throughout school that you're going to become the sum of the things you own, the house you own, the things you own, the grades you collect, the job you have. And there's kind of like this certain pathway to what would be seen as successful. And I guess in that moment, I just sort of, I know in that moment, I just sort of went, well, none of this is certain. And that was the catalyst for everything from that point on, actually. Like, that's when I really started to question everything. And I read your blog that you wrote yesterday, which was excellent. I should point everyone in the direction of that and give it a read. And what happened is I became really self-aware. And once that starts to happen, I think there's a long old journey that you go on that has many highs and lows, where you really start to question all that you do and become self-aware and to question your role within this system or story, as John would call it. So over the next couple of years, after that point, I became more and more disillusioned with what I was doing and had this sense that there must be more purpose to what I could do. And then we held this repair day outside the ski shop. So we did this event called Fix It, Fuck Brexit. It was the first Brexit day that never ever happened. We wanted to do something positive. We wanted to like get our community together because we were dealing with a lot of uncertainty then. We weren't sure whether we were going to be able to stay here and stuff like that. So we did this day, and we encouraged people to come along and donate all their secondhand ski gear, which we would sell and we would repair, and we would just plant as many trees as possible on the day. And we ended up we did a couple more events like that season. We ended up raising $9,000, which we put to tree planting. But what it really showed me in that moment was that our community cares, like they're looking for a way to try and do something to be involved, but also that they have way too much stuff. Like they have, I had mates turning up with 5 sets of ski pants, and I know full well they've got 2 more at home. So that led to us creating an association out here called One Tree at a Time. An association is a bit like an English CIC. It's a community-based organisation. It ended up, at the time we were really lucky. We had one of our staff members was called Courtney. She was a graphic designer, and we were sat in the shop after the event, and she was like, let's create a logo for this, and it became One Tree at a Time. And over the next couple of years, that became a community space in our village, which set out as I managed to secure the space. It's completely self-funded. I put a bit of funding to get like the association set up and to start it. We managed to secure this space on the high street, brilliant location, and sort of just said to the community, what should we create? What should we make here? And then we came together and we started to build this space, and it was built on all the waste that exists in our community. So we built a huge desk at the front where we repair. We sit around and patch over garments so they can be resold. We do workshops creative workshops. We do bike servicing stuff. We do all sorts happens in this space, but it very much got shaped by the community, not by me. And then I was speaking on a podcast, and someone said, "Oh, this is awesome! Like, this is self-funded. Like, how do you scale this thing? It clearly works." And I remember at the time being like, "Oh, I don't want to scale. I've been in these 2 busy ski shops. It doesn't feel like the right way to do this. This space is created by the community. I don't think you can take it from here and replicate it somewhere else in the same way." And that's when I got talking to Heather, who's a very good friend of mine. And when we talk about finding the others on that, what I recognise now is that day that we did the Fix It event, was me putting my hand up to try and find the others. And actually, in that day on that event, I actually found loads of others. There was lots of people in this community feeling, for a variety of reasons, feeling something. And Heather was one of those people, and we set up the Reaction Collective a couple of years ago now, which is a global collective now consisting of 70 organisations that are reimagining the outdoor industry. And they are doing that through repair, reuse, the sharing economy, regenerative stuff within communities. They're redistributing products so people get more access to the outdoors. And we work as a collective. Like, we come together, we share ideas, we turn up at events together, we support one each other to share and tell our stories. And in those 2 years, I think we've gone on to reimagine the outdoor industry and actually completely out-innovate the entire multi-billion-dollar industry from 70 small, tiny organisations existing in a place of possibility and kind of imagining what the future of the outdoor industry could look like.
So how long did that take? Like 5 years or 10 years to
5 years. So One Tree would have been,
Yeah.
well, One Tree is probably about, that first event must be about 6 years ago now. And then One Tree was open for about 3 years before we started to form the collective. In that time, I'd helped seed another couple of spaces. So the vision is that the collective comes together so that we can create community spaces and create community events with communities. It's this idea of like getting together as citizens and creating a citizen-led circular economy. It's not going, what we're doing at One Tree is brilliant, let's replicate it elsewhere. It's going like, here is what we're doing amongst another 70 organisations. What can you take from all of us and bring to your community? And plus, what can we take from you and bring back into our community?
It kind of
yeah.
Things take. They seem to take ages. Like there's Ali who runs a food. Basically, she cooks African food for people in London, and they all go to a co-working space or a community centre, and people who are either live on their own, mostly elderly people, all get together. So they get together, have this community lunch once a week, and it seems like it's been going forever, but very quickly it's got to, I don't like the word scale, but it's scaled. And Urban MBA, which talk about all the time, has just gone so far in 5 years. And when you're in the middle of it, it seems like it's taking for ages. But when you look back, like from 2019 till now, what those people, Ali and Kofi, have done and what you have done, it's really fast. It's like this space-time continuum.
Yeah, no, it's really quick. And so it doesn't cost anyone to be involved in the collective. We did bring in a manifesto to, like, it's a place that we tried. I think my role with the collective is to try and keep this place that's full of possibility and full of emergence, and a place kind of where anything can happen. So we did create a bit of a manifesto, not to place rules on what we want to do, but to keep, sounds fantastic, to keep some organisations out. After we'd set up, we had some rather big companies in the industry say, this is really interesting, like, can we get involved? And we were like, that's not what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to recycle plastic bottles into coats. We're trying to reimagine the system, and we're trying to make it much more localized and much more community focused. And then after that point, there was this kind of really big switch, I'd say, is that I'm kind of fortunate. I get to wear my One Tree at a Time hat and my Reaction Collective hat, because I run a community space and I'm part of the Reaction Collective. And we still haven't figured out how to fund this thing, but we're scraping through and making it happen. But there was a point when Heather and I were like, well, our members going to have to pay some money to be part of this collective. And I always struggled with that, because the amount that I was going to be able to pay as One Tree at a Time was never going to be enough to fund this collective. And also, once you get into that position of like, I'm going to pay money to be part of this collective, I kind of start questioning what I'm getting in return. Like, I start going, did I get enough exposure this month? Did I get enough like great ideas out of this?
I've had all of that. I know what you mean.
And so we suddenly went, well, this cannot be, and also there are organisations, a lot of organisations that are in the space. We're working with really, really small budgets. So we just said, right, do you know what? This is never going to be paid for. This is about getting the right people in the right place and getting them to work and create together. And when we decided that there would never be a fee to be involved, that's kind of when the magic really blew up, because everyone went from like, what am I getting from this, to like, what do I give to this? Like, you could almost see it shifting overnight. And so it became like, I get what this is, like, how can I give? And then from then on, like, people in this collective and organization have gone and created like whole guides on how to run what we call the alternative high street. And we've all pulled together and put all our ideas into it and make these one fantastic guides. We've done all sorts of stuff like that. We've come together at events and put stuff on. So there was something powerful in that moment when we said, right, this isn't about an exchange of cash. This is about an exchange of ideas and support. Doesn't doesn't make funding this thing any easier, but I think it's an important point.
It is. That's what we've done with the London Co-working Assembly, because when you, like, basically everything you said there, when it's like we do events and someone gives us a building, someone gives us some food, and then we just have to send some emails. And there is work involved, but I always, so many times I've looked at a London co-working ship membership, and then I hope that came out right. And then it becomes like, oh, Gavin, are you going to renew? Are you getting enough? We've got I don't know, free subscription to Spotify if you sign up for another year, and it becomes messy. And there's some people that either don't have money full stop because it's all tied up in their business, or they don't have budget to allocate to something like that. And then when it's just like, when you start inviting people to find the others and everything, and they all turn up in the same room, and this has happened so many times, then there's that little sprinkle of pixie dust and people just gel together.
Yeah, there's something else I've experienced as well, is that like all these organisations are trying to do in this collective is quite difficult. They're trying to imagine a new system from within this system, and that means you can turn up sometimes with energy, and that means that long periods in the year that you need to be getting on with what you're doing, and you can't turn up. So you need to be able to give that flexibility to the space and be able to say, look, come when you can and as you can. Like, there's no pressure to turn up. Even like some organisations and some members rarely come because they're doing some really great stuff on the ground, but they'll come occasionally and say, oh, I've got this idea, I've got this material, I've got this problem, can people help? And that's why I think like the change is happening really quick, because the way the space has ended up being structured. And I actually put a lot of that down to the fact that I feel like I've become much more reconnected with nature than I grew up in nature. And I kind of see the complexity and the interdependence within nature. And I'm really happy in that chaos and that messiness and in that space of emergence. And so in some ways I see this collective as somehow a manifesto of that, like how I grew up. At some point along the way, I read Citizens, and which your listeners know a lot about. But John, in that book, framed three stories: the citizen, the subject, and the consumer. And actually, what John did for me, I think, is put words to what I was feeling, and a really simple, I think it's a really simple and effective framework to the world that I was experiencing and feeling. And so it was really natural to try and spread what we were doing as opposed to scale what we were doing. It was natural to try and find the others, to create collective action, to search collective agency. So yeah, a lot of this is John's fault.
Yeah, that even down to the example of IMI and the Impact Hub in Birmingham in the book, like from 2015, 2016, I would constantly reference that place because of the way it tied all the kind of civic action and the radical childcare and the unemployment project they did. There's all these things going on there. I was like, and we at the time we ran, I my friend Phil had a co-working space in Euston Street, just by Euston Station. It was tiny, and we would basically do our best to replicate what we saw them doing online. And then people that were involved in projects there would come into Euston, and there was other things we were involved in, and it all cross-pollinated and stuff. But and then for that to show up as one of the examples in the book was like, oh my goodness. So it did, and the amount of people, I could probably tell you 20 people who have said that gave me the language of what I've been thinking for ages, and that is quite something. What is so what I want to do here, Gavin, is like we're going to link to the Actionism trailer in the thing, and what sound like I'm introducing an idea that we've talked about a lot here. Can you make a point about the theory of, yes, we should do this, and the actual, like, why is it called actionism, not activism?
Yeah. So one of the other people I met on this journey, one of the very significant others, is Ellie Meredith. She's now 19. I might have got that wrong, Ellie. She might be 20. And she's actually our only employee at Reaction. And we met online, thanks to John. John connected us. And she's phenomenal. she's absolutely incredible. Gives me an insane amount of hope to see an 18-year-old with such a self-awareness and such energy and creativity. And we managed to secure a little bit of funding to make a film. Like, we decided, like, what's really important in this moment is we need to keep telling stories. We need to really add more sense and feeling to the work that we're trying to do, so we can get it out to a bigger audience. And so we decided to make this film, and rather than talk about like my story or Heather's story or the Reaction Collective story, we decided that the best thing to do was to tell Ellie's story. And Ellie is an 18-year-old. I'm quite confident to use these words because we speak a lot. An 18-year-old that was feeling quite anxious at school about the fact that a lot of the adults, teachers and parents and stuff around her just weren't talking about the things that she was facing: climate change, social anxiety. And so when she came out of school, she decided not to go on to further education and decided to go out and try and find the others, I guess. And she did find us. And we told her story of moving from anxiety to collective action through a journey through the Reaction Collective. So meeting all these different organisations and getting to understand what they do and her role in collective action. The result is that she got to the end of that, and we managed to, she decided she didn't want to go on to further education, that she wanted to go and do an apprenticeship. And so she's now doing an apprenticeship at Manchester Uni and employed by Reaction. So it's a lovely kind of full circle to the story, but she's very much embedded in collective action, and should be someone you should interview, actually. Should bring on here, because she's phenomenal.
So it's like the story of her onboarding and discovering this universe.
Yeah, very much so. And she's also got this deep sense of like wanting to connect to nature as well, which is a thread through a lot of the people that are involved in this collective. I don't know what it is. Yeah, I mean, like, for someone of a young age, just who wasn't really necessarily brought up in a space like I was, like really in an outdoor activity centre, but just really like this sort of sense and urge to reconnect with nature. And so the story's told by a young filmmaker called Michael. We'd completed the film. We were like, this is great. And then it came to like what felt like a lot of pressure, actually. Like, we'd been able to secure this bit of funding, and it was like, film's cool, but we need to get as many people watching this as possible. And actually, I would challenge that line there. I would say this is about getting the right people together to watch this film. And so we decided to launch a film through community screenings. So rather than put it online and where someone could watch it passively, like in their home, sit down and go, oh yeah, I get this, like, but what can I do? Like, we wanted to bring communities together so they could watch it together and have a discussion at the end of it. And at least just make some connections in that community. Sometimes we host them and we put on workshops. So we might put on repair workshops, and we might do some sewing after the film or around the film. And we launched that, I'm trying to think now, probably about 7 or 8 months ago now. And we've had over 100 requests for screenings now. It's popping up all over the world. Like, it's been screened in New Zealand by the Green Party. Someone just messaged us the other week and said, I've just watched your film at the Green Party summer conference. And we were like, right, cool. And they were like, can we show it in schools in New Zealand? And it's like, yeah, like if that works, sure. So yeah, it's been popping up all over the place, and with it, we're hosting lots of conversations. So quite often, Ellie can travel to some of them. If they're in the UK, I travel to the ones out here around in France, and we get people together and we get them talking. At the same time, I created a magazine to go with the film. I was actually over here in France when we were launching and doing the screenings. So I was like, what can I contribute? So I created a magazine called Actionism that ended up being an 80-page magazine. But back to the term, there was a point when we were making the film and Michael, the filmmaker, as a holding title, chucked this word actionism in. And we like looked at it and we were like, wow, like, I like that. Like, what does that mean to us? And so we put the term to the word is the art of finding the others and taking collective action. So that's what actionism means to us. It's the art of finding the others and taking collective action. So it's a demonstration. You know, like the Reaction Collective is demonstrating what the future of the clothing and the outdoor industry could look like. That's what we're saying with Actionism. It's like, let's come together and demonstrate what the future of our system, or our story, could look like. That's then spiraled into sort of a, you know, at the same time I was working with John. Well, John had formed this thing called the Citizen Collective, and I was in this space called the Citizen Collective, which I think you were in, Bernie, as well.
Yep.
It was like an investigative space to see what possibilities could come out of it. And we found that the term actionism is really connecting. Like, people really get it. And actually what's really interesting, people not only get it, they often talk about it as if it's been there for a long time and talk about their version of actionism, which is amazing to read. Like, there was someone I saw the other week that was doing some regenerative farm work in the US, and they went, yeah, we do actionism and we do it in this way. And I was just like, wow. People, you know, get this term and they put in their own spin and say into it. So there was discussions within the Citizen Collective and what we were doing, and, you know, like this real need to have a kind of storytelling platform. And that's when we started working with Tamazin, who was working alongside John. And Tamazin, Heather, and I launched Actionism, the storytelling platform, which is a space for us to not only tell stories. Like, I think my role in this is different to Heather and Tamazin's in some ways. Like, Heather and Tamazin have a background in messaging and comms, and so they're very much taking an editorial role and writing some incredible bits of content and connecting and doing these incredible spotlights where we spotlight a community each month. I kind of see my role as to like try and make actionism exist on the ground by organising events, like making sure that we've got more screenings going on. We're going to do a weekend gathering in September in the UK. I've got dreams to start bringing actionism and our reimagined outdoor industry and clothing industry to festivals. So yeah, it's become this storytelling space, but a space that we also want to exist in the real world. So it's actually connecting people within communities and places.
You know, it sounds like a co-working space would be a great place to host a screening. What do you think, Gavin?
Yeah, like, I mean, we've had it in a few sort of different co-working spaces, and it's been really great. What often happens and has happened is someone shows it in a space, and then someone either goes and shows it again in a different space in that area, the same person, or somebody else watches it and goes, oh, this was brilliant, I'm going to take it to somewhere else. So it's really got this kind of natural, like, spreading of this film. Like, we haven't, like I say, we just put it out there and said to people, like, please show it in your community, have a conversation afterwards. And, like, you know, part of why Actionism, the storytelling platform, emerged is that we were finding often that in the conversations that followed the film, people were lacking a bit in the imagination of what they could do. They was going, yeah, this is great, and, you know, but I'm not in the outdoor clothing industry, and they were sort of just lacking this space to kind of go, but right, imagine what we could do in our community. You know, what matters to us. And so Actionism is the storytelling platform covers a much broader range of stories, right, from like food, education, community spaces, which you could definitely describe as co-working spaces. And what we're trying to do is share as many different community projects and ideas on that platform, so that when you've watched the film and you've had a discussion in your community, you might go, oh, what's important to me? It's important to me that we become more playful as a community. What does that mean? Oh, here's a spotlight last month about an organisation called Playful Anywhere in Leeds that have been taking over streets and spaces in Leeds and making them more playful and more creative. Like, maybe we could do that in our community.
There's I mean, around that, it is like the whole find the other things, because around 10 years ago, we were a lot of, and how I met so many people in co-working was in 2014. In 2014, I went to the Co-working Europe conference in Lisbon. And what struck me is that I went to that conference and I knew probably about 10 people already. And then I found another 15 people there that I'd known over the past 5 years from other projects. And it's like, what are you all doing in the same place? And, it's like, what are you doing here? And all that kind of vibe. And a lot of us were involved in a thing called We Share, which was OUI, which was like Yes Share in French. And it had a big, very, very active blog like the Actionism platform. And why that was more relatable than, I don't know, TechCrunch or the Huffington Post was because everyone, we knew everyone that was writing on there, and people would write about this is happening in Ilford or this is happening in Paris, or you could actually, you were connected to the people that were doing it rather than it being, so I always find it's easier to listen to Gavin started this project and this is how he did it than this is how, I don't know, Richard Branson started Virgin. It's way more relatable, and I just always find it makes it much more doable because you are so near what is actually happening. And that's one of the reasons, as well as, and I think for people that have come to the citizenship events we've done in the London Co-working Assembly, and this has absolutely happened to me. I go and like I've sat in so many industry talks about marketing, about how important story is and the narrative and the hero's journey, and I'm like, what does that do for me and my business? And then when I found the story brand book in 2018, I was like, that's the first thing I've heard in 10 years that makes me know what to do on my website in the next hour. And it's very easy for people, probably not unlike you and me, Gavin, to sit around and intellectualize how changing the world is, but to go and actually open a ski shop and sew things is probably easier than you think.
Yeah, and I think that's why, when we started, it became called the Reaction Collective, because we put a message on LinkedIn and went, anyone got ideas for this? And someone said, reaction. And we were like, there's so much of the story that's kind of just feels like a natural emergence and fluke almost. But that word act within reaction and that word act within actionism has become so important, because I think it's easier to act your way into a new story than just to intellectualize it. So I think it's really important that when we run these events, that we often do them with a workshop alongside it. So we do it with a repair workshop alongside it, or a creative storytelling workshop beside it. Like, we've created a whole raft of workshops that can be done with the film, because it's often a lot easier to sit around that table and discuss something as you're repairing than it is to sit having watched a film in lines. Because in some way, watching the film in lines is still a little bit passive. Sat in an audience and then having a conversation where someone stands at the front is still a little bit, it still feels a bit difficult for some people to speak up in that case. So yeah, we find that I find that acting your way into a new story feels much more doable. And it's why I think I've written about this before, but John's used the word story as opposed to system is really powerful, because I have a story to write, Like I have a story to tell, to create. When you say like you need to change the system, I feel quite powerless in that phrasing. If I want to change my story, but I can. And I think that gets done through my actions. And it's why I think the way that Imi's done for years is so far ahead of the game. Miles out there, and incredible work.
I feel like after 10 years, I'm just catching up to her.
Yeah, it's mind blowing work.
We'll put a link to the video of Civic Square in the show notes too, folks, because that is it like 10 minutes long, that? But it's like, again, it looks like a 10 minute video, but that is like 10 years, maybe even more than that, of meetings and nurturing and enrolling and filling in forms, and the graft is huge. So we are going to we'll put links to that and the movie, and we're going to be emailing in our newsletters about the Actionism film. And it's so many times over the last 15 years, a film like this has come out in a different project, and we've helped people organize screenings in co-working spaces. And, for me and people like Elena Giroli, we've done that in London, and it is such a good way to bring your community together, because people who are already in your co-working space have something to talk about and get together, and then you meet a whole group of people from around your co-working space that will come because of them. They wouldn't come for business workshop, but they come because they're concerned citizens, and it's one of the best ways to create a new conversation around your local co-working space, which is why I'm going to say adamant about it, but that's not a very kind word. Gavin, is there anything else you want to add or point us to, and we can put a link in the show notes, and and absolutely come back and do this again next month?
Yeah, sure. Just if you feel at the moment that maybe it's not the time to do a screening, or you're going to do it later, you feel like doing one later down the line, or you've not got the space to do it or the capability at the moment, another really good thing you could do is just sign up to the newsletter on the Actionism website on the space. What I really kind of sense and hope that comes out of this is, I talk about this often, but I don't, for the outdoor industry and the clothing industry and all future in the sense, I don't really have a vision or a utopia of my own, because I don't think that can exist, and I don't think in that way for some sort of reason. But what's emerging from the Reaction Collective is a shared vision, a collective idea. And what I hope will happen in the future from that actionism space, like others can contribute to that space. It isn't just Heather, Tamazin and me writing. It's there for others to contribute, to add their story, to appear in spotlights, to share what's going on in their community. Because I hope in a few years' time, there will be a collective vision that emerges from that space of how we could change our story across multiple spaces: food, education, community hubs, travel, all sorts of stuff. So it's really good if people can sign up to that newsletter to give us the support if they want to get involved and they want to write for it. There's we're doing this as volunteers, so there's still a few systems to be figured out, but we're just building ways that people can contribute to the space. At the minute, you just need to email us and let us know what you'd like to write, and we can get back to you. And you can get involved that way.
Ace, thank you thank you for spending all this time today with us, Gavin, and just the whole thing. It's you kind of, with that actionism thing, you definitely created a thing I would have loved to have got around to creating if I'd got it. So it's great to be a part of it.
Well,
ladies and gentlemen,
you're creating it with us, so yeah.
No, it's really cool. It's I was trying to think of something to say there, and it just escaped me. But it is really cool. That sounds so. Oh, it's really cool. I feel like my son staring at the sea. It's really cool. I know, it's magnificent. So in the show notes, folks, there's going to be links to everything we talked about here. There's a link to the Sam Shay's co-working LinkedIn campaign to get recognized as an industry category on LinkedIn. Takes like 2 minutes to fill that form in, and that sounds like a really little thing, but it's huge. I would love, the more I think about this every week, the more I'd love to go to LinkedIn, and instead of putting I don't even know what I've got there now. Consultant, I think it says, to put co-working. It would give me so much joy to identify as a co-worker. Also, there is a link to the LinkedIn co-working group, and we post this podcast in there. We post Fanny's podcast in there and Suzanne's podcast in there. And it's a great way to comment on what you hear in these podcasts that me and in their own projects, Fanny and Suzanne do. And that's a really great discussion area. It's a closed group, so you can, there's 350 people that are active in that group every week. And the more people that comment, the more people will comment. So get in there and do that. And also, I'm going to remind you that in February 2026, which I know seems a million miles away, we'll be at the Workspace Design Show in London again. Okay, wherever you are in the world, be careful out there. It is a jungle.